So this morning we're with Caroline Wright, who is the director of BESA. And obviously I'm John Galloway with...
Carol Allen's here and Bob Usher.
From LGfL.
But the first question really, Caroline, is just to unpack that a little bit. What is the director of BESA?
Thank you. Hello, it's nice to be here. So BESA is the British Educational Suppliers Association. So to explain that simply, basically take a school or college, turn it upside down, take the children and teachers out. Everything else that drops out is probably made by a company that either is in BESA or could be in BESA potentially. So we are the trade association for all the companies that make educational products, resources and services that help schools and colleges at early years in the UK and around the world. Okay,
thank you. And the first question really is, what is your understanding of inclusion? And that is both in your professional life, but there's the other areas of your life where it's pertinent.
I think my understanding is still not expert, but it's hugely improved. And I've been at BESA 10 years now. And actually, if I sort of bring my children's experience into things as well, I'm continuing to learn. So kind of when I went to schools when I was at school, sort of the 80s, tended not to have a very inclusive approach. So actually I went to school with other kids like me, didn't really see other kids or understand other children or other needs and so on. Actually, as I've seen my children go to school, there's a much more inclusive, and I'll explain what I think is inclusion in a minute, but a much more inclusive approach to how they learn. And as such, I can see them becoming better human beings, quite frankly, than people of my age, because they've grown up learning to sort of tolerate, understand and help. Mm-hmm. So I think there's that kind of inclusion. And then there's the inclusion I've learned about since being at BESA. So we have, like I've said, we've got textbooks providers, we've got science lab producers, we've got curriculum content, and we have an amazing group of special needs resources companies. Mm-hmm. And actually from listening to them and learning about what they do, it's hugely improved my understanding of inclusion. And my understanding of inclusion is really about, from my personal perspective, I think it goes even wider than when we talk about special education needs. It's actually about how we are tolerant and understand and help everybody, so that we should all have the same chances and opportunities, whether that's at school or sitting on the bus next to someone or watching TV or radio or listen, or, in our lives. So sort of culturally, societally, and from a sort of economic opportunities, how can people work, how can people learn? So it's kind of approaching inclusion from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you were saying that you're not an expert and that your understanding to develop, because we often talk about inclusion as being a journey, not a destination. And that there's, there's no point at which we'll ever achieve it, but we are moving towards it all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's right, because actually, I think I'll come on to kind of diversity and inclusion, actually, if I may, because I think we're talking a lot about sort of special education needs, but actually it's really interesting. During, I think it was 2020, but it was during the initial Black Lives Matters protests in America, I had an approach from one of our publishers to say, as an organisation, they were really looking carefully at what they were publishing and printing, and was it good enough? Was it reflective enough? Did it reflect a broad? So not from a special needs perspective, they weren't looking at it from that perspective at that point. They were saying, from Black Lives Matters movement, are we doing enough? Should we have better representation? What does that mean for what we publish and how young people see themselves? But also, what does that mean for our staff? Are we bringing up a representative body? Is it inclusive enough? Are we paying them the right rates? What can we do? And they said, well, actually, we'd like to talk to other BESA members in this area to see if there's something we can do as an industry. And that was fascinating. So we kind of said to companies, would you like to take part in this conversation? They did. They came together, and very quickly it was a really good discussion about, well, different companies had different priorities. Some really wanted to focus immediately on the Black Lives Matters movement because they felt that had been very underrepresented. Some others said, well, actually, it's let's unpack that. It's kind of ethnic minorities, it's kind of disabilities, it's gender. What can we do? And some have gone from a broader focus. So developed a set of industry principles that actually they're on our website, and actually for companies in our membership. And there are 3 areas. It's what you produce, then it's how you treat your staff, and then it's kind of how you foster and improve the kind of wider ecosystem. And it is all about, we've got a line in there saying, this isn't perfect, it's a journey, and actually we want to be challenged because we want to improve. So I think that kind of goes for a whole range of kind of inclusion.
But it's a very useful statement. I mean, I've used it with people.
Have you seen that make an impact?
Yeah, it's actually prompted. So that's a sort of a voluntary code for our any curriculum publisher and producer of education resources, because you can be talking about educational toys and dolls and avatars and how they reflect people. And actually, we're discussing that at our executive council. So we have a code of practice for all of our members that covers a whole range of things: integrity, discrimination, standards, and so on, that every BESA member has to sign up to. And there are principles in there of kind of diversity and inclusion, but actually it's prompted us to say, what else? Are these still relevant? Should we look through these? And that's a process that's happening at the moment. So I think it has helped everyone on that front.
It also strikes me that one of the roles of BESA is as an interface between the producers, the providers, the industry, and also the government. Yeah. So is there a point at which you're acting as a sort of, I suppose, a lens, bringing what government, what policy is to the providers, and similarly the other way around, saying to government, this is what we could be doing?
And also to sort of practitioners themselves sometimes, because what I can perceive, and I think kind of organisations like LGfL and other kind of conferences and other avenues help with this, but I get the impression personally that actually as a teacher or a practitioner, sometimes it can feel quite lonely. You've got your heads in the weeds, you're really doing your best in the school or environment you're working in, and sometimes it's really helpful to hear about other perspectives and what other people are doing. And actually the suppliers we work with, they will work across, you know, a couple of hundred, couple of thousand, tens of thousands, depending on their size, of schools. And they're very often able to kind of spot trends and themes more speedily than sometimes government actually, and other kind of maybe local authorities, and actually say, do you know what we're seeing as a bit of an issue coming out? Schools are struggling with, you know, X or Y, or teachers really need more time to do this. And we're able to both share some of the learnings, particularly during COVID. That was sort of a recent example. Obviously, as the world's schools closed, it started, so the school closures were first of all in China, and then they sort of worked their way back across the globe, Middle East, coming to Europe. And actually we've got companies that are supporting schools in China, supporting schools in the Middle East, and they would have had pretty much a month or so before it reached the UK to learn quickly. Do you know what? Get this in place quickly, try and do this. This is what they're finding helps. And they're able to feed back in that kind of iterative process. So that's just one example of how they can help.
You're almost like a conduit, like a superhighway, aren't you? But I'm really interested, because I've always felt that you reach practitioners, but I'm really interested to hear you say that.
Yeah, and so reaching the practitioners, but also the government. So we carry out research on a whole range of issues, and actually have been doing that for a lot of years. So we can point to the themes, we can share that with kind of the officials, so the civil servants, other organisations and ministers. And sometimes they listen. So, you know, we work through and we try and present, we fed into the recent consultation on SEND views from BESA members. So we will do that. And we're actually putting together a sort of policy advisory forums of all of our various special interest groups to feed in topics that are really important, that they want to feed into all of the political parties in an apolitical way. So if you're developing your election manifestos over the next year or so, here are the really critical issues from our perspective. You know, you take that and you do with it what you will politically, but this is what will make a difference. And that's a piece of work we're doing. And that makes me quite proud, actually, being able to work with the companies on that side.
There's a couple of things that rise out of that for me. One is that there are a couple of those, and the TES had a commission this time last year, which put out quite an influential paper. And I'm aware that Unison and NAHT have just done some consultation with parents and just put out a paper. So there's quite a lot of thinking happening at the moment. And part of me wonders whether that's because it's not really happening in the DFE at the moment. I don't know the DFE is is thinking about policy and developing policy. But I just wondered, but the other part of this is actually, over your time in BESA, you must have seen shifts in policy trends. and whether inclusion as a trend, as a policy object, has kind of come and gone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of, I think two sides to that, sort of the policy development or announcements from the DfE. I actually think most schools would probably breathe a sigh of relief if there weren't any, because I think kind of post-COVID, actually, it's about helping them focus on what they know they need to do, and some time to breathe, some time to actually put in place some of the learnings they know will work without maybe something top down on them. So it's not said, I expect there is lots of thinking going on in the DfE and lots of teams of officials working on some probably very good things. I think the political environment we find ourselves in is probably not very conducive to some helpful times for both teachers and government to be talking together in much the same way as lots of the other public sector organisations. And that's really challenging, because at the end of the day, teachers really just want to get on with the job and do what they can. So I hope that some resolutions are reached on that, because I don't think it's not very helpful for anyone wanting to do the job. I'm sure they would like to be focused on that more.
And do you see governmental attitudes to inclusion shift over time?
I thought Will Quince was a very good minister in pushing forward the agenda on inclusion. I think it was quite sad to see him move on to different parts of government, but I hope that work stays in place. And I think it's still true. I'm not an expert on the paper that was published last week, but reading some of the responses and some of the expert views on, I think, well, you can't really fault them wanting to do some things, but does it go far enough? And by the sounds of it, probably not. And given the scale of challenges that we just find ourselves in, turbocharged over COVID, and the emotional well-being needs that our entire generation has, is it aspirational enough? Probably not. And we really need to do more, because ultimately it's that sort of whole Maslow hierarchy. You know, you can't be a world-leading science and tech innovator if you're not supporting the kid. If you kind of take that, I think the Prime Minister's talking about that today or tomorrow. Actually, how do you get there? It's by having a functioning society where people feel valued and can achieve, to build into that. So we've got to start, you know, perhaps it's less headline worthy, but kind of actually have more of an impact if we really focused on that.
So, Caroline, I'm not sure whether this is going to come out as a question. It might end up as a request. I don't know. Let's see how we go. But just to say that I've really enjoyed attending some recent BESA events, and I'm very conscious that for every event I attend, there's probably 5 I'm not. I mean, it's a very, very rich programme. And the thing that strikes me about BESA and these events is you are uniquely placed to bring together suppliers in the industry. And it's well, yes, that's your role. But whenever I'm at your events and I sit there, I think this really is a unique collection of people in this room or hall or what have you. I particularly enjoyed the AGM, which didn't feel like an AGM to me. Yes, it had AGM business in it, but it felt like a very, very rich and interesting conference. And then more recently, your curriculum conference, which I found equally stimulating, very varied programme. Edging towards either my request or my question here, it's the role of the special interest groups. And if we just go back to the inclusion group, there's a lot of work that myself, Carol and John are doing in terms of the LGfL included service. And a lot of our focus is about helping mainstream teachers think deeply about being inclusive by default. Maybe what's the role of the special interest inclusion group at BESA in relation to helping, if I say en masse, your members have that same perspective of being inclusive by default? I think that there's some fantastic products, of course, in the UK EdTech marketplace. I mean, we've got an episode with Now Press Play on the included conversation, and it struck me in that episode that they were inclusive by default. The whole kind of point of the product, it was really, really inclusive to all sorts of learners and appealing in all sorts of different ways. But there's lots and lots of products out there. are all suppliers inclusive by default, and how could BESA help them with that? There we go.
I think the answer is probably you're never going to get 100. You might like to aim for it, but I couldn't hand on heart say that all BESA members without sort of going through all of them individually. But what I do know is, well, two things. To work in education, you have to have an interest in it. The number of kind of BESA members that were founded by a teacher that had a good idea and then made something and started kind of taking it wider than their own classroom. So it genuinely is an industry that does care. There'll always be the odd bad apple, but in its entirety, it's an industry that cares. And by the same token, actually, and this applies to any industry or commercial offering, really, I would think, but particularly in education, it's in their interest to make it as inclusive as possible, because that broadens out, in a commercial sense, their market. So, you know, whether or not their background is in inclusion, it makes all sense that teachers can use it and pupils can use it and students can use it whichever way they need to. So they will be looking at it through that sort of prism if they have any commercial savvy whatsoever. So so those two things together, I think, put us in a fairly good place, but there's always more to do. And actually, it's a really good point about what our special interest specialists could be doing to help the rest of our companies. Actually, because we are so broad, we have thank you for the nice feedback about the conferences. We have sort of general conferences that talk about sort of topics that we hope will be of interest to the majority of companies. And then we have smaller online gatherings every few months of companies particularly interested in a topic. So we have one on special needs. But actually, I think maybe some shared learning across all of our members could be a really good idea to take forward. And it is our 90th anniversary. I'll put a pitch in for that. It's BESA's 90th anniversary this year. So we're looking at ways to try and celebrate some of the successes, and actually I think maybe some of the shared learnings. So it's a really nice idea.
Each of the groups could have almost a 5-minute teach meet slot, you know, to share what they've been doing, just enough to excite the interest of somebody who maybe didn't attend that group normally.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because one of the things I'm really proud of is we do, no matter how much we can always find ways to improve and things we'd like our government and our schools to have more money and to do things better, and so, you know, we can always improve. But actually, when take our special needs companies and go to international events, which we do sort of about 6 times or more a year, the UK SEND system is really highly regarded for what we've managed to achieve and what we're doing and our approach to it. So actually, kind of we go out to different countries and talk about it, and actually it's a really good point. We should be talking amongst ourselves still as well.
One of the things for particularly EdTech companies working in the special needs and disabilities area is that they can be very niche. And so sometimes they're so niche that other people don't know about them. And I like what you're saying about kind of bringing it.
Yeah, but jumping onto that, I think sometimes, you see, what I find with some of the companies, because obviously we all work with a lot of the companies that you're talking about, is that sometimes the niche companies don't realise what they've got to offer into mainstream and how powerful their product is. They see themselves in one. And equally, some of the mainstream offerings, you say, but that's brilliant, this is brilliant. And they go, really? You know, and that's why I love where this conversation's going in terms of sharing across the groups. But I know that because I've been involved in the special needs interest group, you know, all my friends around the table, and that's lovely. But to some extent, you're speaking to the converted, and you know, and that's brilliant. But that strength of what some of the, it's almost what don't we know about some of the things we have. And when we look at some of the products that are considered niche, and I've been looking at one this week, and the implications for mainstream are phenomenal. And when you mention it, they go, really? And so I do think that would be particularly for your celebration. What a lovely way to start kind of.
And quite often it's things that aren't particularly tech intensive or costly. It's I remember when I first started at BESA, going to one of our special interest groups, and like I say, kind of my journey in learning. My mum is dyslexic, And she, obviously, she's in her 70s, and she was very lucky to actually be told she was dyslexic. Up until then, they'd sort of just hit her and told her she wasn't trying hard enough. So, you know, she actually got told, which kind of actually made her feel better about it. They're not sure they actually helped her with anything, but she at least knew that it's not, you know, yeah. And she's coped and developed her own coping strategies. But I remember just learning for the first time about a reading ruler in a different colour from one of our suppliers, and saying, "Wow, that's interesting. I have to tell my mum about that." And then just hearing from her, she I'm not sure it was a particularly sensible fashion choice, but she said, "Oh, these purplish hinted sunglasses, they make me, I've just wondered because I've been reading a lot better with them on." It's like, right, okay, so there you go. And that's something she learned, she kind of worked out herself, but actually being able to talk about some of the science behind it was really useful.
Absolutely. And that science is, interestingly, isn't universal, because if you mention that in Australia, you're in trouble. Because their research is the other way, and they won't have any discussion if I'm working in Australia. And yet, as you, well, precisely, whether the science is right or not, I know it works. I've seen it work. What you're reporting. So, and so I'm interested. The research can sometimes get in the way of practice, and what I like about BESA is that the research is there, but it's practice based. Yeah. You know, and it's
what's happening to that particular child or in that particular teacher's classroom, and what would be the best tools for them to choose from. And that's why it's so important, and why BESA is obviously having so many issues and challenges that we believe the government's approach to OAK is wrong, because actually teachers should have the choice, opportunity and the funding, rather than it being sent on centrally procured curriculum resources, to choose what's right for their pupils and what they need.
Yes.
Yeah, it does make you wonder how the government perceive teachers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
some of the recent messages have given us a clue.
But entirely. But it's also, you know, the OAK model seems to be, here's your script, read this aloud, rather than
by numbers.
And rather than, you know, our understanding of the teachers is, you know, a professional who understands the content, understands the class, understands the context, you know, thinks it through and so on, and then is offered a range of resources, largely from your members, to choose from, in which that they can do that job to the best of their ability.
Researched and with the available for teachers to take a choice.
Yeah.
I'd like to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, which of course is tricky, but also such thoughts bring strategy for the future. And it's always struck me that BESA as an organisation, you do so many different things in the sector, and then you have something called BET, which, let's face it, is quite an extraordinary annual event. And I know there's an equivalent in America, and you support other events around the world, but you know, let's face it, it's quite major, and people come from all over the world to BET. There seems to be an imbalance at policy level about the role of technology in education in the UK, and yet we host arguably one of the biggest, and I would say best, education technology celebrations, as well as commercial opportunities. And I really, really value the opportunity that LGfL has to be able to take part, and I don't just mean have a stand, I mean take part in the programme and you know, have a different kind of an audience. I'm not going to get into potential changes of government, but inevitably, let's be clear, education policy is going to change, and recent things with things like ChatGPT is kind of throwing it up in the air and challenging all sorts of different norms. The role of BESA in the future, from where I'm sat, seems to be going to be ever more important, because I find it incomprehensible that education policy in the future can be anything other than more embracing of technology, an acceptance of the powerful and important role of technology, and of course particularly from an inclusion point of view. So what's your question, Bob? Well, that's rather an exciting prospect if we agree with the hypothesis that BESA will be more significant in the future in relation to the successful, integration of technology ever more, hopefully with a policy foundation, which I don't really feel we have at the moment. Do you agree?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know what I think, to give you some thinking time there. But I think if you think of BESA's role, to me, BESA are the pillars that underpin the practice. And they give us strength, and they give us kind of a purpose. But, Caroline, you've said several times, and several references, about the fact that I know a pillar equals strength, but it also might need to be moved slightly in thing. So I can't see BESA not moving with, what's happening in the same way that LGfL will, in the same way that we do. It's things. But I would be horrified if it's one of the things I wouldn't like to lose, that strength, that underpinning, that celebration at things like BET, But I can't imagine you're not having sessions where you're looking at what's coming.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years is we've been working with Educate Ventures on, it was actually at the time a European funded programme for startups to help them improve their approach to EdTech efficacy and evidence building. So helping new companies actually understand how do you carry out proper research so you can show the impact of your products and tweak them and learn from that. So that was a programme that the European funding's now finished, but it still continues to be a really important issue. So actually we're now putting together sort of programmes and services that larger companies can be able to, they might already be doing it, but giving them an audit on actually, is that effective evidence gathering and managing, so that they can then, in those conversations with schools, so that's an example of something that is becoming ever more rightly important, that you can talk about the impact of your products.
Apply to do that?
It's a programme that we're not the experts within the Secretariat, so we work with professors. Yeah, we connect them with the Educate Ventures team that are kind of Professor Rose Luckin, who's an expert in that field, and then they can go and carry out an independent kind of audit of what they're doing, give them advice and guidance on how they can move forward. So that's one example, and new things do come up, and it will always be about, I really like BESA's mission. We've got it's two elements to it. So we are a trade body. We are there to help support, firstly, the commercial success of our member companies. But really importantly, equally important, is the second kind of pillar of what we're there to do, which is, by doing that, you actually help improve the quality of education kind of in the UK and around the world. So it's those two things go together, because one, we all know the most important thing is a great teacher, and that the teacher has the support and they have the tools. But actually, kind of great teachers, if you've got great products and a great teacher, that's brilliant. You can have a great product but a poor teacher, and a badly trained, someone who needs more development, and it's not going to work in the same way. So actually our role is working with teachers to help upskill and improve and all the sort of services there, but the resources we provide, and if they've got a good product that's well evidenced and ticks all the boxes and is kind of flying out there, well, they'll have commercial success, and actually it'll help so many. So that's kind of what we aim to do, and that evolves and moves on. I don't think I've ever had the same year at BESA where we've been doing the same thing at the beginning of the year as we're doing at the end. There will be things that run throughout it, but different priorities and different kind of activities.
Absolutely, and that's the exciting sector that thankfully we work in. But if I just go back to the government policy aspect, and I don't have some inside track on this of knowing what's about to happen, but there are some key policy decisions, such as, just imagine if all schools were required to be one-to-one devices. Now, it's not difficult to think up lots of reasons why that's not going to happen. In my travels around schools throughout England at the moment, without exception, the best schools I see are one-to-one. And we've got in Scotland, we've got some very large implementations of one-to-one, for example. But the implication for the sector and for BESA members of going one-to-one I'm not saying that all of the BESA members of their products require a device such as a laptop, but there's quite a lot that would significantly benefit. And I just think that we're well placed, all of us actually, LGfL working in partnership with BESA and with all of the other partners that we work together with, we're well placed to really help such a policy decision. It could be quite extraordinary and really turbocharge the whole industry.
Depends how it was done, doesn't it? It depends on if it's an enabling policy that helps schools do something that's right in their context and gives them the choice, or if it's a kind of a top-down, you will accept delivery of, you know, so many devices on this date and they will be, you know, sort of very robotic, and you haven't got the hearts and minds of the teachers and schools. We carried out, it's probably maybe the 85th anniversary of BESA or whatever it was, but we actually did a kind of a desk review of our, what's the right word, is it longitudinal research, kind of going back, and then we carried out some interviews with some of the key people who've been involved in it, and just the key theme that came through is the best policy, well, policies work when you don't force them on people, because the moment you force someone into this shall happen and it will happen in this way, if you're not, you know, I can tell my kids how many ever times to eat their dinner correctly with a knife and fork, and if their hearts and minds aren't in it, they won't do it. And it's the same for anything, isn't it? It's just basic kind of how do you get the best out of people. So it's actually working with the sector on enabling policy rather than a top-down, this is going to happen by April the 1st on 2035, you know. And I think that's really important.
I really like that answer, because I'm old enough to remember the whiteboards. And the amount of money, and let's face it, whiteboard's an amazing bit of kit, but they were plopped into classroom after classroom after classroom with precious little training and used for projection, really, and that meant, you know, a changeover. And also I love what you said there about the context of the school, because Bob one-to-one isn't right everywhere. And it's not the right thing. And there's eminent research. If you look at people like Sugata Mitra and his research, he would argue that would stop collaboration, communication. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but it's about that flexibility and knowing what the pedagogy and what the needs of your school are, isn't it?
It is. Sorry, I'm just going to chip in there as well. So first of all, I don't agree with one-to-one. It has to be one-to-many. So I don't use one device. So why do we restrict kids to one device?
Yes, give them a few.
Give them a few, exactly, and give them the skills to choose the device they need for the task that they're fulfilling. The other one is this thing of, I mean, whiteboards is a good example. What you were talking about research. And the problem for me with whiteboards was we didn't change the practice so that people understood how that device is used for teaching and learning.
Just one of the key things we also came out from that research, and actually that probably needs updating now, but we did a little kind of handy sort of 1 or 2 pager for schools when looking for procurement. And it was on a whole range of things, but particularly on, you know, one of the key things is if you have, you know, this amount of money, this amount, don't just use it all for the kit. Buy less, but build enough into the budget for the training. And that has to be an ongoing. So actually, good companies will give that advice, because it's not in anybody's interest for schools to buy stuff and then not be able to use it. That damages everyone's reputation. Buy less and have the training so that you use what you've got really well, and kind of, and then move forward. Then you'll see the value of it. You get kind of teachers who understand it, and then, you know, also don't just buy it once. You have to build in that you're going to need to replace it. You're going to need to buy more, and build that into a long-term plan.
But also that supports the inclusion, Caroline, because it means that if you've built in that training, if you've built in that theoretical space, that thinking space, that pedagogical space, it means that if you've got a child who needs to use the stuff in a slightly different way, you can explore that, as opposed to everything being one size fits all.
I think one of the challenges, though, is that, I absolutely agree that companies need to demonstrate the theory of why their product is working as well. And I have been involved with Educate UK. I've been a mentor for some of the products. But one of the issues is actually that the research is often narrow around does this work or not, as opposed to the deeper theory. So as an example, over the last probably 5 years, there's been an interest developing in eyesight and dyslexia. And by that, I mean, as an example, that dyslexia may be caused by the eyes focusing at slightly different points on words. And if we can retrain the eyes so that they both focus at the same point.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I know of at least 3 products that have got this behind them. But the research tends to be, does this product work or not, as opposed to, is this a valid underpinning?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So refining our focus on how we look more broadly at evidence.
Well, but is that BESA's role, John?
Well,
because BESA's role, if we're working with education supplies, is our stuff working or not? Maybe that is university research or somebody else who looks at the. Maybe
the kind of thing that Bector used to do.
Oh, well, yeah. I was waiting for the Bector word to come out, but yes, exactly that. Because I could understand if I had a product, would I want to go right into the neurological research of something, or would I want to know whether my product worked or not?
Oh, completely. Yeah. And again, sometimes the focus is narrow because the company are looking for market information.
Yeah.
As not necessarily what underpins the product.
But actually, it's kind of that point of how can companies feed in really into the development of new understanding, and actually that would be great to have slightly stronger links where we can have those conversations.
But brings us full circle to what you said a little while ago about Maslow, and if we can encourage the companies to come in from the bottom, then actually they're going to have a stronger presence and a stronger outcome. And it's going to help all of us.
And the other thing it brings me back to full circle was your starting point about inclusive schools benefit everybody, but in possibly in unmeasurable ways. That, we have a better appreciation of society, we have a better appreciation of each other. And I don't necessarily suggest BESA should be doing research in that area. But it'd be interesting to know, even if attitudinally, we can gather that about our schools. Yeah.
It's been really interesting, of course, to listen to your perspective this morning. But the thing that it's done for me in particular is your 2 core aims. And it's really brought it home to me, the value and significance of you as an organisation based on those 2 core aims. And something that just comes to mind was that I'm going back in time a bit here, but I remember, I think it was 2006, I was working with a teacher in North London on a learning platform, helping this teacher understand the learning platform and the implications and benefits for the school. And this teacher had a profound preoccupation with the commercial aspects of this company being cynical and wanting to make money out of the school. And I couldn't really get this person off that focus. And I remember sitting there all those years ago and saying, but hang on, we need products and services in education. You're holding a pen. We've got electricity. There's a device here. We need to work with the commercial sector. But they just didn't have that perspective. But even then and ever since, I've always, because I have the great privilege of working with fantastic suppliers in the sector, partnerships in all sorts of different directions. But it's always stayed with me, that idea of, why are you really in this sector? And often I have startups coming to me, for example, at Bet and pitch an idea and that kind of thing. And it always is in my mind, why? Why are you coming into this sector? And one of the things I really appreciated about our conversation this morning is to hear from your perspective of the values, not just the commerce within which you're operating as an organisation. And that very much chimes with, of course, what the purpose of this podcast is, which is about getting insights from key people that are involved in education and their perspectives on inclusion. So, from my point of view at LGfL, we really, really want to work closely in partnership in terms of helping all of your members be more inclusive, because, as you say, Caroline, it helps us in every direction.
Absolutely. That's a perfect summary of it all. And that's why, I will, the clue is in the name. It's the British Educational Suppliers Association, but that is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to keep a vibrancy and diversity in the product and service offering we have for our schools and our pupils, that there's a wide range. Because the moment we get to the point where there's, you know, half a dozen very, very large companies, we lose so much in terms of the innovation and the way that the benefits that children will have. Because it is education, actually. I learned this. What does the word education mean? I think it was at our curriculum conference, and it was bringing somebody out. It's bringing something out. So that's what education means. So it's bringing out the best in everyone. And actually, you don't do that with just 4 set texts or 4 ways of doing things or 3 ways of doing things. You need a whole range of suppliers and ways to tackle issues and excite learners. And that's throughout, we've been talking a lot about schools, but that's throughout life. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, sorry, and that bringing out. So for Carol and I, one of the reasons for doing this, but also for over the years working with BESA and LGfL, is to try to have some sort of influence, because you're the people who are providing. So, for instance, universal design for learning is an area that we've been pushing hard on for some years, and I've spoken at BESA about it more than once, and spoken about in kind of the BET Awards, in actually influencing how the BET Awards are assessed. Yeah, but that's sort of, in that sense, I feel we've had an educated role with these organisations, and that's one of the reasons for us being, aligned with you, linked to you, working with you. Yeah, and and thank you and LGfL. For being open to that, for wishing to be educated in that sense.
Well, I think we all learn from each other, and that's the key. And I think, going back to your point, Bob, about kind of the teacher in 2006 that was kind of shocked and appalled at the idea of working with a commercial company. It's whether or whatever, regardless of somebody's politics and how they might like a system to work, we are in the world we are in today with limited financial sort of public sector. I think our borrowing is in the 90% of our national kind of GDP and so on. And actually, in terms of innovation and helping things and being fleet of foot, commercial companies are able to do things and react to situations and circumstances far speedier than any government could. And actually, if we want to help our learners in a whole new world, frankly, no criticism of any government, but if we wait for a government sometimes to think about how they should develop a product or a service to do something, we will be failing generations of children, because we'll constantly be 5 or 10 years behind. Exactly. So we need to have a positive attitude. There are roles and places for each part of our system: government's role, local authorities' role, schools' role, commercial industry. And actually, let's all be open-minded about how we can work together to get the best out of it.
I understand what you're saying about commercial companies being able to be fleet of foot, flexible, and so on, but the education system isn't. And I wonder whether your members might find that frustrating at times.
It has been for them. An example, this was some time ago now, but I remember there is a very centralised procurement framework in Scotland for educational resources. And I remember one example being raised to us by one of our special needs companies, actually, about a teacher who knew that this particular resource would work with a child I think it was a year 6 child, and they really wanted, I think it was only about £30, they really wanted to buy this resource to help this particular child. And because of the very, very, very centralised procurement system in Scotland, it actually took over a year, and this kid was sort of into secondary school by the time they got approval for a £30 piece of kit that could have helped them. Yeah. And that's no
crazy.
Good.
That's a crazy world, isn't it? I tell you what, one of the things that went through my head when you were talking there, Bob, because I've heard that as well, the same thing, but more back in the day. And things have changed. And I was sitting there thinking, why have they changed? One of them is social media, because a lot of the companies who really want to connect with their clientele have got a good active presence on social media, and active in the sense of, so for example, too simple. if a teacher posts on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday night that they've got a problem with doing something, somebody answers them on a Sunday night. And if they can't do it there and then, they'll say, don't worry, I'll bring this through to the tech department first thing tomorrow morning. Somebody will phone you by 9:30 or something like that. And I mean, that's a really cool example, but a lot of them are now interacting that way and presumably gathering useful information also.
One example that, you know, just came up, and I just thought, well, this is a prime example of how our suppliers are there to help, and they really take things seriously. Sadly, when the late Queen passed, and it happened on whatever afternoon we were told, I know there were, just from the ones I saw, there were 3 or 4 of our key publishers and providers that had put up free resources of how to tackle the issue in assembly tomorrow morning. Here's what you can come and talk about. For teachers, can I just say, Oak National Academy, nothing.
No.
Now that's the point of being able to react in a fleet of foot way, and really having an eye on what your audience and customers need. And I felt very proud that actually everyone came together at that point.
Those people need to know is that at our end, the number of teachers who were so appreciative because they could go in and talk about it the next morning with maybe a simple PowerPoint or something, and or the symbols already there. I mean, it was, we were so grateful for that help. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time and your well-considered thoughts this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's nice to see you both.
Yeah,
See all of you.
and it's great to hear, you know, things like your inclusion initiative, and you know, putting out information from members, and you know, having worked with your members, we know that they're people who are curious and caring, and it is I don't know whether it's an unusual industry, but it's certainly one that people seem to be in because of they have the right sort of set of values. Yeah, so yeah, which from my experience, I'm sure Carol too, is, you know, it's a pleasure to work with many of them.
Yes.
And I want to, you know,
I
assume it
agree.
is for you.
It's a wonderful industry, and you know, it's for a good purpose.
Yeah.
What could be more important than actually doing something to help the generations, you know, next generations coming through?
Yeah.
When you have your next, I don't know, team meeting or brief or whatever you do, feel free to say that. Bob, Carol and John, we thank you for what you're doing. Seriously, thank you. Seriously, do thank. Well, I think sometimes thanks isn't explicit, and it's implicit through everything we've done there. But I think sometimes you need to be explicit.